we're going to have 3 speakers, and the first speaker that we're going to have is Ty Moore. Ty is a full-time organizer from Minneapolis for Socialist Alternative. He's on the editorial board of Justice newspaper, our newspaper, if you're not familiar with it. He played a key role in helping to organize Occupy Homes, which, if you haven't heard about it, they have successfully defended 6 homes, and I think that's rising, and stopping the home foreclosures and keeping families in homes and providing a model for where Occupy can go from the encampments and out into the neighborhoods and building a movement around that. He also, let's see.
That's pretty good.
I think that's pretty good. Join me in welcoming Ty.
Thank you, Jess, and thanks to Seattle Socialist Alternative and the Sawant campaign for having me out. It's been a really, really inspiring experience. In an otherwise pretty depressing electoral season, to come out here and participate in the door-knocking campaign, in the street standouts, etc., where, you know, I think defying all the odds, defying the corporate media blackout, etc., that a socialist, an openly left-wing, anti-corporate socialist candidate was able to receive such a big vote. The big story of 2012 elections could have been, if the ideas presented in this video of 200 Occupy candidates, could have been the beginning of the left challenge to the two-party corporate system in this country. But unfortunately, that was not the story. Unfortunately, the 1% Wall Street corporate America continued to dominate. Despite that, what I think has been, if you read the corporate headlines, and from the point of view of millions of ordinary people, what was the big story was the across-the-board defeat of the Republican right-wing agenda. Tens of millions of voters came to the polls not to say yes to much of anything. Here in Seattle, we had something to say yes to. But across the country, people came out to say no to bigotry, no to the budget cuts, no to attacks on unions, to attacks on immigrants, to attacks on women, and no to the naked rule of Wall Street. And in many ways, the very closeness of these elections, the nail-biting race to the finish line, only sort of increased the profound sense of relief by millions of working people, particularly of LGBT people who following the historic vote in favor of same-sex marriage in 4 different states, you know, saw celebrations in the streets, understandably. And as socialists, despite our, you know, opposition to Obama and the Democrats, we understood the tremendous sense of relief that people felt that Romney, Ryan, and the right-wing juggernaut that it was attempting to take this country backwards was soundly defeated in race after race after race across the country. But in no way, I think, can these elections be considered a mandate for the Democratic Party. They were completely incapable of rousing the kind of enthusiasm and positive illusions that Obama did conjure up in 2008. After 4 years of betrayals, of bitter disappointments, after the Occupy movement in Wisconsin and the Chicago teachers strike, both parties have had a spotlight shone down on their corporate backers, on the role of Wall Street, on the fact that they do not represent the 99%. The idea that there's 2 classes in society, the 1%, the wealthy, the super rich in Wall Street, and the 99% was popularized under the Obama administration. And the people who were radicalized in this past period understood in their millions that the Democrats did not represent them. So this time around, the Democrats' entire electoral strategy, their entire message, reduced to sort of the traditional message of last resort for their party. Simply saying, we're not as bad as the other guy. We're the lesser evil. And simply saying, and you have no other option, which outside of a few places like Seattle was the case. There was nowhere to go for the left, nowhere to go for workers if you wanted to keep the right-wing agenda at bay, or that's how it seemed. And the naked domination of big business over this electoral system has never been more brazenly apparent than it has been this election cycle. Federal elections alone, $6 billion was spent in the election cycle, breaking all records. And undoubtedly this has, a lot to do with the Citizens United decision of the brazenly right-wing Supreme Court that unleashed, basically unlimited amounts of corporate cash into the electoral arena. But Marxists have to soberly point out, we don't agree with the liberals who sort of will say, well, with a few more regulations, with better campaign finance reform, we can restore our democracy. We can come back to having ordinary people have real representation in government. What Marxists explain is that it's the trend that predates Citizens United, the trend of increasing corporate influence, of increasing corporate crash, corrupting elections, has been going on for several decades now. And it's intimately linked with the decay of U.S. capitalism, with the relative slow-moving and increasingly fast-moving crisis that U.S. capitalism has been in for the whole past historic period. And especially over the last 5 years of this economic crisis, the worst since the Great Depression, the room for the ruling elite in this country to sort of, use pro-worker reforms, to use the carrot rather than just the stick, has increasingly run out. And more they're forced into sort of naked forms of class rule. And that's what we've seen in this election, of the unabashed, influence of figures like the Koch brothers, or of Goldman Sachs, or of a whole series of other wealthy individuals. A figure like Newt Gingrich, for example, was competitive only because he had just like 2 or 3, super rich backers who threw him into the race, despite him being a heavily discredited, right-wing, morally repugnant individual. But he was able to sort of have a lift, to be seen as a credible candidate, because a couple billionaires thought, he would serve them well as president. This is this level to which democracy has stooped. And the spotlight was shown on that because of Occupy, because of the growing politicization of increasing layers. People saw that. And people saw that Obama, in so many ways, was not really any better in terms of whose interests he served, who funded his campaign. So what can we expect in the next few years? With the little enthusiasm that Obama did muster during the elections, the few hopes that he's managed to re-inspire about, maybe in the second term when he doesn't have to compete for re-election, maybe he'll, show his true colors. Maybe, the accusations of the right wing that he's a socialist, he'll actually come out and, reappear as the figure many saw him 10 years ago, supporting Palestinian rights and, single-payer health care and being a community organizer. Maybe the real Obama will reappear. But I think those illusions will be very, very, very quickly dashed. In fact, anyone who's, soberly reading the news headlines since Wednesday morning will recognize how quickly it is. On Wednesday morning, the news headlines, along with all the election analysis, etc., or I think maybe this was Thursday morning, my bad, had John Boehner and Harry Reid, announcing together that, we think we're going to be able to come up with a compromise to deal with this fiscal cliff that's looming. And I had a good punchline in here, the hopes that Obama will be dashed against the hard fiscal cliff, but I think I missed the good way to put that. But what this fiscal cliff is going to mean, what this fiscal cliff is going to mean is unless the ruling elite, Wall Street, is putting tremendous pressure on both parties to massively slash Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security potentially, even though the Democrats say that's off the table. In reality, Obama has, said it's on the table, off the table, on the table, off the table for the last few years. We should not trust, the shifting statements. We're about to see some of the most historic cuts to some of the most vital and basic social programs that working people, through struggle, have historically won. And that's going to immediately throw Obama back into sharp opposition with serious trade unionists, with community organizations defending poor people, with people who, rely on education, on basic social services, who need housing, etc. The logic of capitalism, which is the system that Obama in the final analysis defends, in this period of crisis, the logic of capitalism will force the Democrats as well as the Republicans to continue and in fact to deepen the attacks on ordinary working people. All the signs internationally, if you look to Europe, to China, and even to the US, point toward a new economic downturn in the coming period. It's hard to predict when, but there's no basis to hope for a continued upturn, as many of the sort of well-wishers of the capitalist economy would like to see. Most sober analysis, even from a capitalist perspective, understand that the worst is yet to come. You know, that Obama's headline, the best is yet to come. From an economic point of view, the worst is yet to come. And that will force the Democrats, unless they're prepared to break with capitalism, to implement increasingly severe attacks on working people. I know that's going to happen at the state level here in Washington, and it'll happen nationally. The same mood that we saw in Wisconsin and Occupy, that we're witnessing internationally in Europe, the same mood of resistance, the same understanding that we need to fight back, still exists. It was subdued and buried as many swallowed their criticisms of Obama and the Democrats to keep the Republicans out. That same mood exists, and it will reappear, in my mind, with a vengeance in the coming months and coming years. That the idea that the only way forward is to struggle is in the air, and that won't be pushed back much longer. Ordinary people are looking for an alternative, looking for a way out. You can see that even more clearly in places like Europe, where the crisis is more severe and where the movement's more advanced. And I think our election results here in Seattle point both toward the possibility of struggle, point toward the ability of working people to build their own political voice and get an echo for that, and in particular point to the reality that socialist ideas will be seeing a resurgence in the next period. People want an alternative. They want a way to fight back. They want to see, you know, what is a alternative system that can meet our needs, that can, you know, house us, employ us, free us from poverty, free us from homelessness. These are the questions on people's minds. Free us from the climate crisis. And I think the ideas of socialism can give a profound answer to the deepening crisis that this system faces. So let's look forward to a period of struggle and to 200 Sawant-style campaigns in 2013 and beyond.